Welcome, folks. My name is Hugh, and Rabbi Brian is scheduled to be on a flight somewhere round about now, and I suspect he's sending us some good energy at this moment. He's left actually a video message, which I'm going to ask Alex to run for us right now.
Nice.
There he is. Man, the myth, legend.
Too serious.
I have friends of religion outside the box. I'm glad you're here, and I'm super glad that Hugh Donnelly is here and serving as today's host. Quick story. Hugh said to me that he had already said yes, and he said, Brian, it will be odd because I don't have the long personal history with the people that you do. And I get some variation of this from people from time to time, that they think that I have a long-standing relationship with. The truth is, I think I've only hugged 4 people who are here and 6 if my sister and mom are on right now. But if you feel like you're new and you want to reach out in the Zoom chat, type I'm here, and I bet some people will respond. If you're watching online, or if you're watching from Facebook or from YouTube at a later point, and you want to join us live here for the fun of ROTB, sign up at rotb.org and you'll get an invitation to the service. A little bit of construction going on. I have friends of religion outside the box. I'm glad you're here.
There we go.
Super glad that Hugh Donnelly is here.
Okay, stop video.
So what? We're being streamed on Facebook, and I've had nothing to do with that. I just trust that that's happening. But I think it's kind of cool when Brian asks people to wave to the Facebook crowd. So could you greet the Facebook crowd? Hello, you good Facebook folks.
Hello, Facebook.
So glad you could join us today.
Hello. Here.
So Brian called me about a month ago and asked if I'd consider hanging out with you good folks today. I'm getting lots of background noise here. I'm just trusting you're all able to hear me. I'm a teacher at a spiritualigious, I love that word actually, a spiritualigious community here in Canada. I'm in the small city of Waterloo, which is about an hour west of Toronto. And a little bit of history. I've been receiving Brian's 77% weekly for a whole bunch of years now. But then in the winter, this past winter, something kind of weird happened. It was weird, but it was totally grace-filled. One night I had a dream about Rabbi Brian. And in this dream, he and I were sitting at a table, we were drinking beer, and we were philosophizing and just enjoying each other's company. And when I woke up, I thought, hey, that's cool, because that's exactly what I would really love to do. So just for fun, I emailed Brian and I said, I dreamed about you last night, Brian, and I thought that he would either think that that was totally weird or perhaps kind of charming. So after a bit of joking by email about which beer is better, Canadian beer or Portland beer, and we all know the answer to that question. Brian wrote something really beautiful. He said, Hugh, can we make this dream of yours a reality? We Jews have an expression, if you will it, it is no dream. So after that, we planned a Zoom lunch, and it was great to share space with Brian and to get to know him a little bit better. So in the meantime, I've been receiving the weekly email advertising the Saturday service. When I lived in Toronto, I was part of a Buddhist Sangha, but I had not found a spiritualigious community since moving to my present location. And I was really missing being with people not connected with my work. For some reason, I had developed a sense that you good folks were a pretty cool crowd. So a couple of months ago, I decided to give you a try, and it's been great being a part of your community. Actually, no, that's wrong. I shouldn't say your community, our community, because I'm a part of this community now. And I'm really grateful to you for welcoming me and for the good gifts that I have received from you all over these weeks. I love that so many of you come with open minds and open spirits, that you are eager to learn to live more meaningfully and more intentionally, in the hopes that Brian and I talked about what's the purpose of this, of Saturday service. And one thing I took away from that conversation was the Saturday service is to help us love more deeply, to help us love others more deeply, to help love ourselves more deeply. So I'd like to start with a couple of minutes of meditation. In my religious tradition, and in many different spiritual religious traditions, we use a lot of words. There's just, sometimes I think there's too many words, and it's the spaces between the words that are as important. So I'm going to invite us to two full minutes of meditation, or quiet, or whatever you want to call this time together. I would invite you just to use this time in whatever way you normally would. If you don't know what to do in silence, what I like to do is to just focus on my breathing. I breathe in and I breathe out, and I try to be aware, mindful of what it feels like to breathe in and what it feels like to breathe out. Sometimes I'll even use words like I'm breathing in peace, or I'm breathing in grace, and then I'm breathing out peace or breathing out grace. And what will invariably happen is your mind will begin to wander. That happens in meditation. And when you notice that your mind's wandered, then you can just gently let the thought go and then just come back to the breathing. Some people think that meditation is actually having a clear mind. It's actually not. Meditation is just noticing what your mind is doing. And when you notice it, when you notice a thought or a feeling, you just let it go gently and come back to the breath, come back to the breathing. So I don't have a bell. 2 full minutes. Use this time however you wish. Ding, ding. Ding. There we go. Some beautiful silence. So I have a couple of announcements to start off. To state the obvious, I am not Rabbi Brian, and if I tried to teach and lead a group exactly the way Brian does, I would fail miserably. And I think such an approach would go against everything I've been learning from his and your teaching, and that is, we're just called to be our authentic selves. So today's going to feel different for you, and that's okay. I told Brian that I cannot try to fill his shoes. I can't do that. What I told him is, I'm going to try to learn to walk in my own shoes. That's my life. And also, I'm not a mental health professional. I'm a clergy person. I just happen to read a lot of books and think about the kinds of things that I'm going to be sharing with you today, and I like to talk about them. So that's, I guess, why I'm here. We need somebody to do Brian's announcement today. And do we have a volunteer for that? I can't actually see that many. I've got an old computer. I can only see a handful of faces. So if you wave thinking I'm going to see you, I probably won't. So I'm going to invite you to use your digital hand raising thing or just speak up at an appropriate moment. Do we have a volunteer for the announcements today? It's going to be a short announcement time then, I guess. Oh, there we go, Maria. Thank you, Maria. Alex is going to put the announcements in the chat for you.
Okay.
Super. And I don't have Brian's really cool technology. Sometimes I have a little bit of techno envy, I must say, but it's going to be a low tech. But the most important bit of good news today is that there is no exam today. No exam. So let's just dive right in. I have to tell you, I was a bit surprised when Brian called me last month and asked if I'd host today's service. As a spiritual religious leader, I've led like a couple of thousand services in my life, but they've never been the kind of service where people get to talk back. This is a brand new thing for me. But I want to tell you what happened right after he asked me the question, and this is part of an introduction to the theme for today. The very first thing that went through my mind when he asked me if I would lead today was, I don't know if I can do this because I sure couldn't do it as well as Brian does. I'm not as good as Brian is. And there you have it, a perfect example of how quickly and I think so many of us, move to a place of self-judgment and self-criticism. It seems to come so naturally to us. Did you hear precisely what I said? I said, I'm not as good as Brian is. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this today. Last week, Brian shared a quote about the way we so easily judge others. We don't judge trees, but we do judge others. Do you remember that quote? Actually, I'm going to share it with, I'm going to share screen with you here so we can look at it again. I thought it was a brilliant quote. When you go out into the woods and you look at the trees, you see all these different trees, and some of them are bent and some of them are straight and some of them are evergreens and some of them are whatever. And you look at the tree and you allow it. You see why it is the way it is. You sort of understand that it didn't get enough light, and so it turned out that way. And you don't get all emotional about it, you just allow it. You appreciate the tree. The minute you get near humans, you lose all that. And you are constantly saying, you are to this, or I'm to this. The judgment mind comes in. And so I practice turning people into trees, which means appreciating them just the way they are.
Amen.
I wonder how you've done in seeing people as trees this week. Today, though, well, actually, there was something that happened last week that I found really interesting. Brian asked, do you find it you more quickly judge other people? Does that come more easily to you, or are you quicker, or does it come more easily to judge yourself? And I don't know if you noticed, but a lot more hands went up when he asked the question about judging yourself. So today's quote is this one. I really like this one. A flower does not think of competing with the flower next to it. It just blooms.
That's nice.
So this is from a book called Zen Shin Talks. It was a book in 1998 by Sensei Ogui. So instead of being trees today, I'm asking you to think of yourselves as flowers. So just let's take 2 minutes. What does this quote say to you? I'll share it again so you have it. And just feel free to speak up. What does this quote mean to you?
Just be as you are.
Yeah.
Everybody's
That's all you can do.
everybody's so quiet today.
Well, I think that's normal. I think it's because I'm a new kid and it just feels different, but that's okay. That's okay.
We haven't heard you swear, Emily.
Yeah.
Right.
Once you swear, you'll bring it down.
Dude, speak for yourself. I'm typing away like crazy here.
So, super Lee. I hope you're typing about the quote. What's the quote say to you folks?
Well, one thing that hits me is the idea of competition.
Yeah.
People are so much into comparing themselves to others. For example, in my job, so and so was called to do this job, and he gets all the praise. And hey, I was here, I was ready, I was, why didn't they call me? Or this guy is not doing as good a job as I am doing. But the idea here is flowers don't do that. We should do what we're called to do in life, and just let it be. Let that speak for itself and for ourselves, and not trying to step on others to look good.
Thanks, Shmuley. I mean, that's exactly what I did when Brian asked me about the service today, if I would do it. I immediately went to a place of comparison, and what that elicited from me or evoked in me was critical self-talk. I said, I'm not as smart as Rabbi Brian. I'm not as funny as Rabbi Brian. I don't think as quickly as Rabbi Brian. Heck, I'm not even as good looking as Rabbi Brian is. Like, I cannot lead the Saturday service because they're probably not going to like me. I'm going to fall flat on my face, and on and on and on. And then what happens is when I notice that I'm beating myself up, then I have more reason to judge myself more unfairly. And I end up beating myself up for beating myself up. It becomes this cycle, this spiral of self-criticism. So right. I think that
you're Canadian.
Yeah.
That's one thing.
And you're very cute, Hugh.
Oh, well, thank. I wasn't looking for compliments, but I will just swallow that one. Thank you.
We love you, Hugh. We love you.
It wasn't a compliment. It's just where you're starting from. So you will start downgrading yourself as a starting point.
And that's what I want to talk about today. Like, I wonder why do we move to a critical place of self-talk so easily? So I've decided to do a bit of reading on it, and I found a couple of really great books on self-compassion. Now, at the end of the service today, I'm going to put in the chat a short bibliography of 3 books that I found really, really helpful on self-compassion. One of them is by a psychologist named Kristen Neff. Her book is right here. I'll just hold it up for you. Self-compassion.
Yes.
Yeah, you know that book. It's a great book. She's done a lot of great research on self-compassion, and she says something really interesting. She makes a distinction between self-esteem and self-compassion. Right. And I find this really, really helpful. She says that self-esteem is finding self-worth in comparing ourselves to others. And normally when we do that, we need to feel that we're special, or that we're above average, or that we're maybe even as worthy as the person that we are comparing ourselves to. It's about boosting our own positive attitude as it is in relation to other people. I need to have the sense that I'm better than you at something, at whatever is being compared, or at least as good as you. And then we compare ourselves to others. We look for things that we can boost ourselves up about. This became really vivid to me, that this is a human tendency. When at a church I served previously, there was we had a workshop on different ways of praying. And one of the practices of prayer that we tried together as a group was kinesthetic prayer. We used some simple yoga moves. Now, there was one person who always compared herself to others. She was always, and she would talk about it regularly. So I was chatting with this person after the workshop, and she proudly declared that during one of the poses during the kinesthetic prayer, she said she looked around at all the others in the room and decided that she had the absolute best prayer pose of anyone in the room. And I didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the thought that she was comparing her manner of prayer with her perception of how successful others were at praying. Now, I'm not speaking badly about her, because when she said that, it made me realize that I do that too. Her illustration was just so vivid. It was just such a dramatic illustration of something that I do and that we tend to do. We want to be the best. I want to be the best preacher, or I want to have the best technology, or I want to be as good as Brian at or whatever it is. We want to be the best at stuff. Now, I think you can see the problem with this, and that is that such an approach to boosting self-worth or esteem is kind of like stuffing ourselves with candy. We get a sugar high, but it doesn't last long, and we end up crashing. And then we begin our hunt for another esteem boost. Like, who else can I compare myself with next? Who else can I be better than? And it kind of becomes addictive. And of course, not everybody can be as good as everybody else at everything. And ultimately, if you seek self-worth in comparison to somebody else, it's doomed to fail.
Right.
Self-esteem, as this psychologist defines it, is all about sourcing our self-worth in comparison to the flowers around us. So what this means is we're not practicing the good habit of acknowledging our own weaknesses, our own flaws, our own limitations, and I would add, we're sometimes not in the habit of acknowledging our own pain. We're not practicing accepting our true selves. So what's the answer to this destructive cycle of esteem, of trying to feel good enough, or competent enough, or perfect enough, or with it enough, as my friends in their posts on Facebook? I mean, you all know what that feels like when everybody else seems to have their shit together. How can we learn to accept ourselves without needing to compare ourselves to others? So,
I have a question about flowers.
Difficult.
So we have a few hands up. I saw Carol.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You know,
Barb had her hands up.
Thank you for reminding. If you could do that for me today, I can't see everybody, so forgive me. Bob, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
I have a question about flowers. I have some daisies, and that when they intertwine, are they trying to choke each other out or hug each other?
You'd have to ask a botanist that question, but you know, I like to think that maybe they're hugging each other. I don't know, Bob. That's an interesting one. Yeah. Carol Ann?
You're muted.
I was thinking about a saying I heard. It says I was told to stop comparing my insides with other people's outsides. You know, I keep thinking that I'm different from everybody else somehow. And it's not true. We're all human. We all have assets and liabilities, and we all struggle and we all rejoice. And I'm just trying to get past that I'm separate from, I'm different than, and be one amongst.
Amen to that, Carol Ann. I mean, I have a Facebook account, and there's things I love about Facebook, but I always have to be mindful that when I'm seeing someone else's life on Facebook, I'm seeing the part that they want me to see.
Right.
I'm seeing the projection of them. So I like what you say about the insides, because I'm seeing their outsides when I see it on Facebook. So thank you for that great thought.
I think Barb had her hand up as well.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Barb. Go ahead.
I'm not very organized about this thinking, so let me just spew it. I actually listened to a podcast last night of Tara Brach and Kristen Neff on self-compassion. And so one of the things that she was talking about, and I haven't really put this all together for myself yet, is that being less than self-compassionate is an attempt to stay safe. And now let's go to the flower metaphor. Flowers actually do compete, but what they compete for is food and sun. They don't compete for who's prettier. Does my leaf look prettier than your leaf? And so maybe there is something analogous in that if we get scared, one of the things she said, we'll punch ourselves in the face before to head off somebody else doing it. So if I tell myself I'm really stupid, then I don't have to, I've got ahead of everybody.
Oh, right.
Wow.
Say that, Barb, say that again about
we go to a place of criticizing ourselves in the effort to head off the idea that somebody else might do it, because that's scarier.
Mm.
We feel more in control if we do it to ourselves. That said, it's the first step in becoming more compassionate to ourselves.
Yeah.
So there's a paradox in there, because as we notice we do that and why we do it, it opens up these new possibilities.
That's so you said a lot of really important stuff there. Thank you for that. I'm going to actually, I'd like for us to do a minute or two of word association, like the word compassion here. What are some words or associations you have with that word compassion? What is compassion?
Feel with.
What was that?
Feel with.
To feel with?
Mhm.
What other? I'm not looking for a definition necessarily, just associations. What is compassion? Kindness?
Caring. Lovingness.
Understanding.
Empathy.
Caring.
Patience. Patience?
Sensitive.
Sensitive.
Unconditional love.
Loving unconditionally.
Being in somebody else's shoes.
Yes, in shoes. So the word, did I hear the word connected there?
Happy.
I'll say it, connected.
Connected. So the word compassion, I'm going to define it for you now. The word compassion is an awesome word because it's a Greek and Latin root for this word. And the com is the Greek and Latin for with. And the word passio or passion is the word to suffer. So we have compassion, we suffer with the other. Now, what's interesting here is that in order to be able to suffer with somebody else, you first need to recognize that they are suffering. You encounter somebody who's living on the street, or you know somebody who's just lost a loved one, or you have a friend who's broken up with a partner, or you know somebody who's struggling with mental illness. The list is long. I love the Buddhist phrase that everybody is fighting a dragon. Everybody is fighting a dragon. And the first step in compassion is to acknowledge the pain of the other. You can't move to a place of compassion if you don't acknowledge their pain. And that's the really important step here, acknowledging the pain of the other. And I find it interesting in my own spiritual-religious tradition. I mean, every religion has kind of a great, what do they call it? A golden rule, like, and usually they have to do with, loving others or having, they point to the area of compassion. In my own tradition, when Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And I read that as, what's the wisest way to live? The answer was, love God, love your neighbor, and love yourself, right? That's from Leviticus 19. Now, what's interesting in my own scriptures is that after Jesus was asked this question, he goes on to tell a story of the Good Samaritan about loving one's neighbor. He doesn't tell stories which help us to know how to love ourselves in narcissistic ways. And so I say, thank God for the Buddha, which actually is not an appropriate thing to say, because the Buddha was agnostic when it came to things about God. His disciples would say to him, tell us, is there a God? And the Buddha would say, don't ask that question. Like, just be compassionate. That's what Buddha wanted. So Buddha lived long enough to develop this practice, which helps us to have compassion, not only for others, but to recognize the suffering of oneself. So compassion is, imagine taking all of these things that you mentioned, understanding, patience, to feel with, to be in somebody's shoes, to feel connected, to have kindness and empathy, to be loving. Imagine taking all of those and directing them not outward, but directing those things inward.
Hey, Hugh?
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that one of the things to think about is, in order to empathize with a feeling somebody else is having, we have to have allowed ourselves to feel it first. And a lot of times with things like pain and anger, we don't want to go there.
Absolutely.
So we don't empathize. We sympathize, and which is more of an avoidant tactic.
Yeah, and I think this is where I'm actually going with this. So thank you for that awesome segue. In order to have compassion for ourselves, we need to acknowledge that we have places of pain. Now, sometimes our pain is blindingly obvious to us, that's true. But I think very often things happen and we don't actually recognize that we are suffering. When we're in a stressful situation, we want to, or if there's a problem that comes up, we want to fix the problem quickly, or we move to a place of self-criticism and we forget to acknowledge that that's a painful time for me. I want to tell you a story which illustrates, it illustrates pretty obviously. It was a moment when I should have actually practiced self-compassion. I had a ministry student. I was supervising the student and his name was Brad. I'd known him for years as Brad. So when he was finally ordained and was going to be inducted in a new church, they asked if I would lead the ceremony. I would preach a sermon. And so I said, of course, I'd be happy to do that. So I wanted to make it personal to Brad. And it was a kind of a formal affair. His friends was there, his family was there, and we were all wearing gowns. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to make it a little bit more formal. I'm going to call him Bradley throughout the service. So that seemed to be the way to go. So through the service, I called him Bradley. After the service, when we were all having donuts and coffee, Brad's mother came up to me and said very kindly, Hugh, thank you for your kind words to my son. Thank you. But you need to know something. His name is not Bradley, it's Bradford.
Oh, dear.
So where do you think my head went immediately? It went, you stupid effing dunderhead. What an embarrassment. You're not good at your job. You're not even a very good friend if you don't know his real name. So I moved immediately to a place of self-punishment. But in that moment, and this is the important thing to remember, I did not need to be punished. I was actually hurting. I was suffering in that moment. And what I needed was somebody to come up to me and give me a hug and say, do you know what? Yeah, you effed up. You're just hurting. Just remember that I love you. But there was nobody there to do that for me. I wish I'd had this self-compassion skill. So here, if you remember one thing from today, I would like for you to consider this. Think about this thought. The moment that I start negative self-talk is the moment I am in pain. The moment I'm going to say it a second time because this is so important. The moment I start negative self-talk is the moment I am in pain. We don't move easily to a compassionate place. We let the critic voice overwhelm us. We don't think of moments, embarrassing moments like that as a type of pain that's worthy of a compassionate response. We move to judgment. We move to fixing the problem. And I think of actually, I'm going to pull up my friends. I like these so much that I actually bought a set myself. So,
you bought them?
So I don't know what Brian calls these guys, but we have the stimulus. We have something that happens to us, and then we have our response to it. And normally those things are really, really, really close. I quite like this image. So in that moment, the stimulus was, I was made aware that I effed up, and I saw that as a threat. It affected me. And so I moved very, very quickly to a place of judgment. I moved very, very quickly to a place of, oh, what am I going to do about this problem? If I had left a little bit more space between the stimulus and the response, I would have learned that in the space in the middle, there was pain. I was operating out of a place of pain, and we forget to do that. We respond so quickly to things that we don't notice that there's pain on the inside.
When you're speaking of this, it reminds me of something that may relate. Earlier in my life, I had a book, and I don't remember the name of the book, but it identified a person as having three internal parts, so to say, a parent, adult, and child. And that the feelings that we get are the feelings that our child experiences. The messages that we send ourselves are our parent messages. And that, so I think that one of the things is, excuse me, learning how to be sensitive to the child.
Yeah, the way the brain works is really interesting. And you folks are always like a step ahead of me, because that's exactly what I want to just spend a couple of minutes looking at now. I read a book called The Compassionate Mind by a guy named Paul Gilbert. I'll put this in the bibliography. There's lots of graphs and charts and ways that help us lay people know what's going on in our brains. Like, why do we do this? Why do we move to self-criticism as easily as we do? And Paul Gilbert says that there are parts of our brain that are triggered by specific things that happen from the outside, and that the two main, well, he mentions three, but I'm going to name two today. And that is, there's a part of the brain that's called the threat system of the brain, and there's a part of the brain called the soothe system. So let's talk for a minute about the threat system in our brain. So part of our evolutionary success is that there's a big part of our brain that keeps us out of danger. You know, we lived in fear of saber-toothed tigers for a long time, and the folks who did not have a well-developed threat system of the brain, they got eaten by the saber-toothed tigers. The folks who did have a well-developed threat system, they did not get eaten, and they left children, and we are their direct descendants. So a protective mechanism that's tuned into danger is hardwired in us all. That's the way our brain works. Our default setting is to look for, to pay attention to, and to repetitively think about bad stuff. That's kept us alive. That's been part of our evolutionary success. But what happens to us is our threat system is active and it's in overdrive a lot. So right now in Waterloo anyway, we have no saber-toothed tigers. We don't need to worry about getting eaten when we walk outside. So what are the kinds of things that activate this threat system of the brain? I'm going to actually turn on my
COVID-19.
Yep, there's all kinds of things. But I'm going to focus for a little bit though on the internal things that we see as threats. Like we see as, I'll just put here threats. Some of the threats could include things like mistakes we make. Feel free to add. Perceived flaws.
Things we don't know.
Things we don't know. Yep, uncertainties.
Judgments of others.
I think sometimes we're threatened by, I made a joke about it earlier, flaws in our appearance. We could see those as threats sometimes.
Expectations of others.
Yep.
And expectations of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So these are the sorts of things that activate the threat system in our brain. And what they threaten is things like our reputation, maybe our social status, our relationships. When I made that mistake with Brad, I responded, if the threat system part of my brain was activated because I thought, ooh, word is going to get out that I'm a bad minister. Like that was what I was afraid of. And that maybe our career or our finances, our health, our future, our happiness, there's all kinds of things that keep us in a place of fear. So one thing that you need to know, and this, I tell you this because this was something that I found really, really helpful and encouraging, is when our threat system is activated, our thinking becomes really narrow and it becomes really negative. You know, we beat ourselves up for not being rational or reasonable or balanced. That's not going to happen when your threat system is activated. When your threat system is activated, you want to get yourself safe, and it takes over your brain. That's what it does. So we can't beat ourselves up for not being rationally minded. We don't need sophisticated thought when we are in danger. We just need quick thought, and that's the way our brain is designed. So there's another system of the brain, though, that's called the soothe system.
What?
Now, this part of the brain is very, very different than the threat system, and it has a calming influence on the threat system. It helps to quiet it down when it becomes overactive. The soothe system is happening when we're just chilling out, when we're feeling safe and calm. And this is interesting. You cannot be in the threat system and the soothe system at the same time. You can't. So you're in one or in the other. So what are the kinds of things that stimulate the soothe system? Well, it's the things we've been talking about: experiences of kindness and care, that all the words related to compassion. The day that I went, used my friend's wrong name, I went into threat mode. But if somebody had come up to me and given me a hug, that would have activated the soothe system. But because there was nobody there to hug me, if I had been in the practice of self-compassion, if I had been able to see the space between the stimulus and response and see the pain that I was in, then I could have tried to activate the soothe system myself by thinking compassionate thoughts. So these are the things that activate the soothe system. The things that you said. They activate the soothe system and they interrupt the threat system in the brain. Actually, there's a kind of a neat, I'll draw this for you. This is kind of a helpful way to look at what goes on in our head. And I share this with you just because I found this really helpful to me, because I sometimes beat myself up because I think, why do I think this way? And I realize this is normal. This is normal part of being a human being. So what we have here is we have, actually, I'll get rid of that sheet there. So we have a trigger. So the trigger can be something that activates the threat system in our brain. Maybe it's a situation or a thought, a memory of the past, an emotion, maybe a physical sensation, and our threat system is activated. And we have emotional responses, we have physiological responses, we have behavioral responses to that. So one of the things, and there's lots of reasons why this happened, I'm not getting into this today, but very often the initial response to this particular stimulus is self-criticism. That's often the first thing that happens. So we blame ourselves for the trigger, we blame ourselves for the way we're responding. We just move very, very quickly to the solving the problem, minimizing the pain. So what happens then is self-criticism will then move back up here and feed into the threat system. So you end up having this loop, and you get caught in this. Self-criticism keeps the threat system activated, which makes us criticize ourselves even more. Now, all is not lost though, friends, because the soothe system over here, I'll draw it down here. When we activate the soothe system, what it does is it interrupts this. It interrupts this cycle. Now, I'm not pretending that activating the soothe system is an easy thing. And we could spend, well, I think actually that what Rabbi Brian has been sharing and what we've been sharing about self-kindness and non-narcissistic loving of oneself, I think this is all about keeping our soothe system activated and trying to interrupt the harmful systems that are built into us in the brain, which are designed to keep us safe. So I'm going to stop there for a few minutes. Thoughts on this? Like, what are your questions or comments about this?
I'm thinking that some of this might be learned behavior. I think that what happens is that as we are going through our childhood, that a lot of our actions are being corrected because we're not doing the right thing. And so we become accustomed to being corrected and begin correcting ourselves. And we don't have, we are not at times given the opportunities to experience the compassion. And so that's not a natural thing. So I think that that we go through a process of unlearning, and I think that that's part of it.
And you're absolutely right, Bob. I mean, these particular frameworks are always a little bit simplistic. They point to some dimension of truth, and you're naming another dimension of truth. And that is that if I've been criticized as a child, or if I have people in my life who are mentors to me, who have taught me to be critical, of course, I'm naturally going to respond to the threat system more naturally in that way, for sure. Totally.
And that's why in that commandment of love, loving yourself is critical.
Yeah, that's the part we forget sometimes.
Well, I think, isn't that more too, that it's equal to loving others? And in others, we need to love others and God and self as equal.
You know, Emily, can I do a God drop right now? I think you just hit the nail on the head. I hear people talk about, you know, prioritizing things in their life, and they say God's at the top, and then my family, and I think, wait a minute, how do you separate God from everything else in your life? If you love your family, that is an expression of love for God. Yes. Loving the stranger. Loving the neighbor, all of these are ways we love God. I love what you say, because for me, it's not binary. It's very much a holistic kind of approach to the way that I would use the word spirit is at work in the world. And that I love in some traditions where they bow to one another. It's almost like they're bowing to the divinity or the sacredness in the other. I really love that tradition because it reminds me that sacredness is in us all. So thank you for that.
Amen.
That opportunity for a God drop, Emily. Thank you.
Hugh, I'm sorry, I need to interrupt here. I think we're getting on to time for
and we
Maria
need
to read our announcements.
We need to do it. Thank you, Alex. You are just an amazing help today. I get so caught up in my own thoughts sometimes. Thank you. So take it away.
She's on the ball.
I can't sing. Announcements. Okay, there we go.
Maria, you're on deck.
Okay. There we go. All right. So hello, I am Maria, and I am today's announcer for the Saturday service. And please, as it is tradition, give a cheer for me, because I am
Love your rainbow
and I have
hair.
to say, it felt great to take that in. I'm going to swallow and take in the cheering. All right, the ROTB announcements. The Clubhouse. Members of ROTB's online community Clubhouse in the last week tackled what they thought would be the real ones. So if they were asked to compile the 7 deadly sins, and people had lots of suggestions on what should be included in that list. So you can join in the discussion and the caring community as it evolves. Office hours. Rabbi Brian's regular office hours will be canceled for this Tuesday because He's off having too much fun. So post to the Facebook group or Clubhouse if you want to find out where the gang might be hanging out on Tuesday. The next one is about James. In what Rabbi Brian is calling a total bullshit move, the California Department of Corrections, in his absence, removed our friend James as chairman of 5 self-help groups. James wrote, "I am not broken. There is a crack in their spirit, not mine. It is easier for them to hate than to deal with their own pain." Perfect for what Hugh was talking about today. "I will continue to love and be kind. All one-time donations to ROTB made between today, Juneteenth, that's today, and the end of the month will be devoted to helping James's book, Profiles in Rehabilitation, to press. RB estimates that $500 of ROTB funds would fully cover recently discovered expenses associated with bringing to life Profiles in Rehabilitation, a massive collection of 17 authors whose words might just change your outlook on life. Make your donation more fun by giving in multiples of $18. 18 is the Hebrew number for life. Thanks. Great thanks to the Shekinah group, to the Video Helper Committee, Lyndon for Video Stat Help, to the gang of spreadsheet nerds. Thanks for all who take the time to donate and make this magic happen. Aviva for grants, Lee for transcribing, Alex for tech, Kip for deep dive, Tom for getting poetry up and running, Kate, who is stepping up in poetry, Joe and Maria for having been hosting donuts, and you, yes, you, for being willing to be you. And a giant thanks to the brave Hugh. And now, back to you, Hugh.
Yay.
Maria. Good job.
Nice
Bravo,
job.
bravo.
Thank you, Maria. There's 5 minutes left. I had like, I don't know, another hour's worth more for us to talk about today. We'll have to save that for another time. What I wanted us to do today, and which I didn't have time for, was for us to share strategies for self-compassion. And that might be something that you use as a TWIP this week, is what are some strategies? How can you become aware of the critical self-talk? Because sometimes we do it without thinking about it. How can we, the pinky thumb thing, like we have to learn these things. These just don't come naturally to us. And part of the reason why I love spiritual religious community is, and to go regularly, to be part of a spiritual religious community regularly, is that helps us to learn. It helps us to keep reminding ourselves of keeping these practices in our life. So another time we'll talk more about strategies, but I invite you to share that, think about that, and you maybe use that as your TWIP for this week. So we've got a few minutes left. I'm just open to any questions or comments or wisdom that you can share with one another.
I've got one thing I'd like to add, Hugh.
Yeah, Kip, go ahead.
So a lot of this talk about deactivating the threat system reminds me of the work of Dr. Peter Levine, who's a research psychologist out of Colorado, who's done his entire career around traumatic responses. He started out working with veterans coming back from Vietnam, and he's actually studied the nervous system and the autonomic systems and how you de-escalate those threats. And what he's pointed out is that our modern society, we've really separated ourselves out from the normal systems that allow us to de-escalate. One of his most famous examples is a herd animal that is preyed upon can go into a shock state and freeze, but then when they are no longer under threat, they get up and they shake those energies out. It's very important, that shaking part. And I don't know if anyone else has ever noticed if they've ever gotten really scared or threatened or whatever, and you might start shivering. It's our instinct is to kind of suppress that. Well, he illustrates a lot of other ways where we were suppressing our natural biological soothe system that our other animals have. So it's a book, Waking the Tiger, that I recommend, and I think fits really well with what you're discussing.
Thanks, Kip. And I see that you put that in the chat. So thank you for that. And I've posted the 3 books that I made reference to, or in the chat as well. It reminds me of another book years ago I read. Why, I think it was called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers or something like that. Like they'll run away from the lion and then they just start to happily graze again immediately afterwards. Right. So yeah.
Very
Eileen. I see Eileen. Thank you, Eileen. Go ahead.
I've studied yoga and all different kinds of things with breathing. If you close your right nostril and breathe in and out through your left nostril only, deep breathing, it connects you to the parasympathetic, and that's the calming side of you. You want to energize, just breathe through the right nostril, but it's a physical way that if we can't get control over our thoughts or whatever, plus breathing slowly anyway, but through the left nostril will connect you to the calmness.
Oh, shit, the left
Thank you,
nostril.
Eileen.
Is it the middle left nostril?
Close the right nostril, breathe only in and out through the left.
We can give that a try.
Stick your finger up your nose.
However
perfect,
you
Emily.
get a cork, yeah, whatever works.
One of my yoga teachers taught me to just breathe in and go out real slow. And it not only calms me down, it lowers my blood pressure.
Meditation, like you can have a formal practice of meditation, sitting on the cushion for half an hour a day or what have you. But if in the middle of a stressful situation, if you just close your eyes and do what I invited you to do earlier, be aware of your breath, that does amazing things to your body and your brain in the moment. You don't need to meditate for half an hour. All it takes is a few moments of that to actually affect a healthy change in your body and your mind. I see we're in our last minute, so I just want to say a couple of things. I want to say thank you for hanging out with me today. I'm just so grateful for this community. I love being with you. I'm grateful for the ways in which we give and receive gifts from one another. So thank you for that. And I want to ask the folks who are going to be in the rooms which follow, the poetry room, the donut room, who needs to say what about that, just so that all flows properly.
You take a breath. You seem to be take a breath.
Yeah, did a wonderful job, Hugh.
Thank you, Hugh.
You did.
Thank you, Hugh. It's been great.
Thank you, Hugh.
I think Hugh deserves a hand. Thank you. So at this point, I'm going to stop the Facebook stream and